A U.S. general stood in front of cameras and said something that was meant to discredit an entire nation's strategy with a single sentence. He claimed Burkina Faso's military government was misusing its gold reserves. He suggested the gold proceeds were simply being used to protect the regime. It was dismissed in seconds. A talking point, a soundbite designed to paint Captain Ibrahim Traoré as just another African strongman hoarding national wealth for personal power. But here is what General Michael Langley did not expect. Months later, the results of that exact gold spending were sitting in plain sight. 6 million tons of cereal production, $300 million in free tractors delivered to farmers, a rice processing facility ranked among the top 10 largest in Africa, a billion-dollar canal project underway. The gold the general claimed was being misused was busy feeding 22 million people. This is the story of how that mockery backfired completely. Welcome. This is Arisen Now. Let's go back to the moment itself. It was 2025, and the relationship between Western military leadership and Burkina Faso's government had been deteriorating for years. Since Traoré expelled French troops in 2022 and began nationalizing the country's gold mining sector, Western officials had been searching for a narrative that could discredit the entire model. General Michael Langley, speaking publicly about the security situation in the Sahel, made a comment that was carried across international media. He suggested that Burkina Faso's junta government was misusing its gold reserves, implying that the revenue from the country's nationalized mining sector was being funneled toward protecting the regime rather than benefiting the population. The framing was deliberate. It fit a familiar narrative that Western commentators have applied to African leaders for decades. Strong man seizes power. Strong man seizes resources. Strong man enriches himself while the population suffers. It is a powerful narrative because, historically, it has often been true. But Traoré's government did not respond with a press release. It did not respond with outrage. It responded with tractors. Here is what the gold revenue that General Langley referenced was actually funding in the exact months surrounding his comments. In 2024, the first wave of the agro-pastoral and fisheries offensive delivered 400 tractors, 239 power tillers, and over 700 water pumps directly to farmers, free of charge. Equipment valued at around $130 million, 69,000 tons of fertilizer, 18,000 tons of improved seeds, thousands of tons of fish feed and fodder. Traoré stated the objective himself, standing in front of farmers receiving the equipment. These tractors will be used to plow your land for free of charge. The objective is to truly achieve food self-sufficiency. Then in May 2025, right around the time General Langley's comments were circulating in international media, Traoré escalated the program. 608 more tractors, equipment valued at nearly $180 million. By that point, the total investment in free farm equipment had crossed $300 million. All of it funded by redirecting state revenues specifically from the nationalization of gold mines, revenue that under the previous arrangement would have flowed primarily to foreign mining corporations and their shareholders. So at the exact moment Langley was suggesting the gold money was protecting the regime, that same gold money was sitting in the cabs of tractors being driven by Burkinabe farmers across the country. The timing could not have been more revealing. The gold revenue did not stop at tractors. It funded the water infrastructure that turned the tractors into something more than expensive machinery sitting on dry land. The Douro perimeter, less than 100 miles from the brutal edge of the Sahara, operates on a solar-powered pumping station delivering 9,720 cubic meters of water every single hour. That infrastructure required capital, engineering expertise, solar panel procurement, pump installation, gold-funded. The Bagre growth pole, harnessing a 1.7 billion cubic meter reservoir on the White Volta River, deployed satellite monitoring, IoT sensors, laser land leveling, and automated irrigation systems across thousands of hectares. Gold-funded. The Daya perimeter near the Sahara's edge, using Archimedean screw pumps to lift water from the Serba River into a 2,240-hectare gravity-fed canal network that has pushed farmer incomes up by 177% compared to rain-fed agriculture. Gold-funded. None of these systems exist by accident. They required sustained capital investment over multiple years, executed by Burkinabe engineers using equipment and materials that had to be purchased, transported, and installed. That capital came from the same source General Langley was describing as misused. By 2024, the combined effect of this irrigation infrastructure and farm equipment distribution had pushed Burkina Faso's cereal production to 6 million tons, more than enough for the entire domestic population. That is not regime protection spending. That is national infrastructure spending that happens to come from a domestic resource instead of a foreign loan. Beyond the fields, the same gold revenue was financing an industrial processing build-out that the general's comments never acknowledged. The Kamsila rice processing facility, now ranked among the top 10 largest in Africa, runs at 400 tons of rice per day, using optical sorting technology, operating at 64 million megapixels of precision. That technology was not cheap. The machines, the facility construction, the installation, the training of workers to operate it all required capital. The Manofa wheat factory tripled its annual capacity from 9,000 tons to 32,000 tons, now running a 150-ton daily capacity. The SOB tomato processing plant, inaugurated in November 2024, processes 6 tons of fresh tomatoes per hour, nearly 100 tons per day, at a cost of approximately 8 billion CFA francs, 100% owned by the Burkinabe people. The SN Anatrans cashew processing factory in Bobo Dioulasso, an $11.5 million investment, processes 5,000 tons of cashew apples annually, with a workforce that is over 90% women. 2 brand-new state-owned fish feed factories, commissioned to support the floating fish farm network across the country's hydroelectric reservoirs. Faso Kosam, the decentralized dairy processing network built across the country's major dairy basins. Every single one of these facilities required upfront capital that in the old system Burkina Faso would have needed to borrow from international financial institutions, accepting conditions, accepting foreign contractors, accepting a portion of the value flowing back out of the country. Instead, the capital came from gold revenue that General Langley characterized as being used to protect the regime. The regime, it turns out, was busy building rice factories. The gold revenue extends even further, into the infrastructure that connects all of this agricultural and industrial capacity together. In late 2024, Traoré handed over 900 pieces of heavy machinery, bulldozers, graders, excavators, compactors, to the Brigade Nationale des Sapeurs, the military engineering corps. The equipment came from top-tier Chinese manufacturers like XCMG and Sany. Traoré was explicit that this was not foreign aid. These were not gifts from Beijing. They were purchased outright with Burkina Faso's own state funds, the same gold-derived state funds. The Faso Mayabo initiative, launched in October 2024, used this gold-funded machinery alongside military engineers and citizen volunteers to begin paving roads at a target rate of 5,000 kilometers per year, 100 times the historical rate of 56 kilometers per year that Burkina Faso averaged over the previous 6 decades. By May 2025, the Ouagadougou pilot phase alone had delivered 9 kilometers of newly paved urban roads. Simultaneously, more than 100 kilometers of major highway contracts were already underway. These roads carry the tractors to the fields. They carry the harvest to the factories. They carry the finished products to the markets. Every kilometer paved with gold revenue that critics claimed was being misused. And then there is the project that makes the entire criticism feel almost absurd in hindsight, the Burkindi Business Center, a 35-story glass tower rising in Ouagadougou, surrounded by 14 additional 15-story buildings, with a total price tag of over $500 million US. 2,000 modular office spaces designed to consolidate government ministries that have spent decades renting dilapidated colonial-era villas, 700 luxury apartments, a 3-level shopping mall, health facilities, a dedicated mini power plant, while the tower itself is being developed by a private Burkinabe company, Castor Africa Group. The broader economic environment that made this kind of investment possible, the macroeconomic stability, the redirected national revenue, the infrastructure connecting the capital to the rest of the country, traces directly back to the gold nationalization policy that Langley criticized. A country that General Langley implied was misusing its mineral wealth to protect a fragile regime is simultaneously building one of the tallest commercial towers in Francophone West Africa. That is not the behavior of a government hiding its resources to cling to power. That is the behavior of a government investing its resources in visible, permanent, productive national infrastructure. To understand why General Langley's comment landed so poorly with so many observers across Africa, you need to understand the historical context he was speaking into. For over 60 years, Burkina Faso's gold left the country and the population saw almost nothing in return. Foreign mining corporations extracted the mineral wealth under contracts negotiated during and after the colonial period, contracts that left Burkina Faso with a fraction of the actual value of what was being removed from its soil. That arrangement was never publicly criticized by the same Western officials who suddenly found cause for concern the moment a Burkinabe government began keeping more of that value for its own people. The implicit standard being applied was strange when you examine it closely. When foreign corporations extracted Burkinabe gold and the profits left the country, silence. When the Burkinabe government nationalized that same gold and redirected the profits into free tractors, irrigation systems, rice factories, and roads, accusations of misuse. The double standard was not subtle. And Traoré, when asked directly about Western criticism of his sovereignty agenda, has been consistently clear about what genuine independence requires. If you don't have food sovereignty, if you don't have energy sovereignty, if you don't have technological sovereignty, then you don't really have full independence. Gold sovereignty is the foundation underneath all three. Without control over the mineral wealth, there is no capital to build the irrigation systems, fund the tractors, construct the factories, or pave the roads. General Langley's comment, intentionally or not, was a defense of the old arrangement, dressed up as a concern about transparency. Now let's look at what happened in the months that followed. By April 2026, less than a year after the general's comments circulated internationally, Burkina Faso announced that it had halted all rice imports from abroad entirely. A nation that had imported 70% of its rice for generations was no longer buying a single grain from outside its borders. Cereal production for 2024 had already crossed 6 million tons. Projections for the 2025 to 2026 season pointed toward 2.68 million tons of maize, 2.4 million tons of sorghum, over 1 million tons of paddy rice, and 1.1 million tons of millet, pushing total cereal production past 6 million tons again. The Kamsila rice facility was processing 400 tons per day, competing internationally on quality thanks to its optical sorting technology. The Minifa wheat factory had tripled its output. 710 Brazilian cows had landed, calved, and begun injecting over 1.2 million liters of fresh milk annually into a sovereign dairy network. The Poulet Faso chicken breed had replaced all French and Belgian broiler chick imports following the October 2025 ban. 180 floating fish cages were operational across the country's desert reservoirs. A 35-story skyscraper was visibly rising from the Ouagadougou skyline. None of this is the profile of a government hoarding resources to protect itself from internal threats. This is the profile of a government that took a criticized financial decision and turned it into the most productive redirection of mineral wealth that West Africa has seen in a generation. Let's be precise about what financial misuse of national resources actually looks like, because the term was thrown around carelessly. Misuse looks like decades of mineral wealth extraction where the profits flow into foreign shareholder accounts, while the population that owns the land underneath remains dependent on imported food. Misuse looks like a government taking out loans denominated in foreign currency to build infrastructure, only to watch the contract value flow back out through foreign consulting fees, foreign equipment purchases, and foreign engineering salaries, leaving behind a debt obligation and a fraction of the promised development. Misuse looks like importing 70 million liters of powdered milk every year at a cost of $50 million, while the same country owns 71 million livestock animals that are producing milk nobody is capturing. Misuse looks like 300,000 tons of tomatoes rotting by the roadside every year because no one built a processing plant, while the country imports canned tomato paste from abroad. That is what misuse looks like. And under the previous 60 years of foreign-aligned governance in Burkina Faso, that is largely what happened. What General Langley was describing as misuse, gold revenue funding, free farm equipment, sovereign irrigation systems, domestic processing plants, and national road construction is by every reasonable economic definition the opposite of misuse. It is the textbook definition of sovereign wealth deployed toward national development. The general got the word backward. A U.S. general looked at Burkina Faso's gold strategy and predicted failure, corruption, and regime self-preservation disguised as development. Months later, the results told a different story entirely. 6 million tons of cereals, all rice imports halted, a wheat campaign that defied 60 years of expert consensus, a rice processing facility ranked among Africa's top 10, a tomato plant turning 300,000 tons of fresh produce into finished goods instead of roadside waste, a cashew factory employing hundreds of Burkinabe women, a sovereign dairy network fed by Brazilian cattle genetics, a domestically engineered chicken breed, floating fish farms in a landlocked desert, $300 million in free tractors, 900 pieces of road-building machinery, 5,000 kilometers of annual road paving targets, a 35-story skyscraper rising in the capital, a billion-dollar canal in the design phase, all of it traced back to a single decision. Nationalize the gold. Keep the value at home. Invest it directly in the population. The general called it misuse. History is recording it as one of the most successful redirections of mineral wealth toward national development that the African continent has produced in a generation. The mockery did not age well. The gold the general dismissed is now sitting in the form of rice bags on Burkina-based supermarket shelves, tractors plowing Sahelian fields, factory machines processing tomatoes that used to rot, and a tower rising over a capital that for 60 years could not pave its own streets. Sometimes the most powerful response to criticism is not an argument. It is a harvest. This is arisen now.